The series starts with Jane, an employee at the meteorological department. She's very smart and organized in her life, doesn't have many friends, and is engaged, deeply in love with her fiancé. Jane appears with her mother and her sister Tira at their clothing store. Jane tries to call her fiancé, but he doesn't answer. She's surprised when he sends her a message saying he won't be able to go to work today because he's not feeling his best. She doesn't understand what's going on, so Tira tells her that their mother went to see him yesterday and probably upset him, as she does every time. When their mother arrives, Tira is upset with her for what she did and asks her to leave Jane and Han alone because they've been in love for 10 years and have never fought. But the mother isn't convinced and tells them that nothing is more important to her than her daughter Jane's happiness, and she's not confident about Han. After that, they get in the car together to visit a fortune teller to learn about the nature of Jane and Han's relationship after marriage. They hear the meteorological department announce that the weather today is clear, with no rain. Jane is very annoyed and doesn't believe in what they're doing by visiting the fortune teller, but Tira advises her to listen to her for the sake of her future married life, even though Tira herself is divorced. When the fortune teller arrives, she tells Jane she won't be happy with Han if she marries him. Jane gets upset, doesn't believe her, and wants to leave. Before she goes, the fortune teller calls her back and advises her to take an umbrella because it's going to rain, but Jane looks at the sun shining and the clear weather and decides not to believe her or take the umbrella. Later, Jane goes to Han's place, and when she tries to open the door, she finds that he has changed the password. She rings the bell, and when he opens the door, he's shocked to see her. He asks why she came at this time, and she tells him she brought him some food and wanted to check on him. She assumes he changed the door password so her mother wouldn't visit him again and upset him. She gives Han the food she brought and leaves for work. At work, Jane's colleague calls her to inform her that there's a 5% chance of rain today, to warn people. But Jane thinks the probability is low and takes no official action. Meanwhile, Lo, an employee at the meteorological department headquarters, shows up with a new car. He calls his colleague Yoon and offers to give her a ride to work in his new car. She's surprised and asks how he got it, and he tells her he bought it on installment. When she gets in, she notices a lot of dust inside the car, so he explains it was a used car. They decide to have breakfast outside since the weather report has already aired. The waiter comes to take their orders and recognizes Ryul because she was there recently. When Lo asks her about it, she evades, saying she was here with a friend a while back. As they're sitting, it suddenly starts to hail heavily. They rush to the car to head back to work, but on the way, car windows and airplane windows get broken due to the intense hail. Back at the meteorological department, everyone gathers quickly to check the radar signals and analyze them. They realize there was a signal indicating rainfall, but the manager in charge of weather predictions didn't report it. He gets very angry and yells at the manager in front of all the employees, blaming him entirely. Jane feels guilty because she ignored her colleague's warning about the potential rain and didn't broadcast the news. When her colleague asks if she feels guilty for ignoring his warning, she doesn't respond. The manager orders the staff to contact airlines and transportation companies to assess the extent of the damage. Meanwhile, Deputy Director Lee informs him that reporters have arrived for an interview to explain the situation. Suddenly, the manager falls ill and faints, causing panic among the staff, who quickly call an ambulance. Jane steps in to give the interview to the reporters as the manager is taken to the hospital. During the interview, Jane notices Han standing with another woman and moving away from her as soon as she approaches. She asks him who the woman is, and he tells her she was just asking him something. At the hospital, Choi's wife argues with the manager, blaming him for Choi's condition. Back at the meteorological department, Jane is appointed by the general manager to take Choi's place until he recovers and returns to work. Jane is surprised and tries to explain that her wedding is next month, and she can't fill in for Choi until he returns. But the manager refuses to assign anyone else because she's competent. While Yoon is at work, Lee sends her pictures of scenic views on the island, asking for her opinion. We learn they are in a relationship, but Yoon doesn't respond to him because she's very upset about the problems at work. Around this time, Tira calls Jane to inform her that Han hasn't paid the deposit for the wedding hall, which she found out by chance when she called the hall to inquire about something. Jane hangs up quickly because there's an emergency meeting, and Lee expects rain to fall again. He contacts them to present the evidence supporting his prediction, but Jane dismisses him, considering the likelihood very low. Jane's colleague, who previously informed her about the 5% chance of rain, contacts Lowe, asking him to announce the rain and warn the city residents immediately. And when he does that, Jane gets into an argument with him because he didn't get her permission. The director and the other employees find out that he informed her last time, and she didn't do anything or warn the residents. They get upset, and the general manager takes Jane to his office and tells her she was wrong for not informing them. The city's residents begin to take precautions before it rains, and all the employees leave work early. Jane goes to confront Lee about what he did, believing the rain wouldn't come and that he unnecessarily disrupted the city because of a very low probability. But suddenly, it starts raining, and Jane is left speechless and embarrassed since Lee was right. That night, Jane sees her messages and is shocked to find out that all their wedding bookings, including the dress, venue, and honeymoon, have been canceled because Han didn't confirm the reservations or make any payments. She goes to his apartment, and when she enters, she sees the shoes of the girl who was with him at work, and she is shocked. She then sees Han cheating on her with that girl. Jane breaks down crying, unable to believe he cheated on her just a month before their wedding, after 10 years of love. She confronts him, and they have a fight. They break up, and the wedding is off. After a while, Han stands with Jane and tells her he will resign after he's assured she's doing great in her job and can carry on his career path. Later at work, the general manager informs Jane that Han has requested a transfer to another branch. That night, Jane goes to the apartment where she and Han were supposed to live after their wedding and is shocked to find the TV, stove, and many other things missing. She doesn't think for a second that Han, the love of her life, did it. She thinks it was her mother, so she calls her sister Tira to ask if their mom went to the apartment and took those items. She's surprised when Tira tells her their mom didn't go to the apartment at all. Jane quickly calls Han, pretending she dialed him by mistake, but when he calls back, she tells him she called him accidentally. She then asks if he took the TV and other things from the apartment, and when she finds out he did, she's shocked. She goes to meet him and asks why he did that, to which he says it's his right since they got the apartment and furniture together. He took what he brought and suggests they sell the apartment and split the money evenly. She's even more surprised by his audacity. He then gets a call from his new girlfriend and says, "Excuse me," and leaves. The next day, Jane has breakfast with Tira and their mother, who are very happy she broke up with Han and are overjoyed. After that, Jane gets ready to go to work. There she sees Lee trying to enter, but has forgotten his entry card, and security won't let him in. She knows he's an employee from the Capitol office and allows him to enter. Jane then goes to talk to the director and lets him know she's unhappy about Lee's transfer from the Capitol office to the main headquarters. When she leaves his office, she sees all the female employees gathered around the girl Han cheated with, congratulating her on her engagement to Han. Jane gets upset and goes to the bathroom, where she overhears two girls talking about her, saying she has to see Han all the time due to the nature of their work, and wondering how she can handle it. Afterward, they hold a press conference to inform the journalists about the weather conditions, and Yoon is among the journalists present. She deliberately provokes Jane several times. After the conference, Han calls Jane and asks her what she's done about selling the apartment. She tells him to shut up. But then Lee comes in and informs Jane that the general manager wants to see her. She leaves Han and goes with Lee. After that, she sees Lee standing with Yoon outside and learns that they were in a relationship before she got engaged to Han. Yoon asks Lee not to let anyone know they were involved. That night, Jane goes to sell the TV and other items from the apartment since the wedding is off. After a while, the representative who bought the items from her sends her a message, informing her that she scammed him by making him believe the brand of the appliances was different from what she said. The price difference between them is huge. Jane is shocked and realizes she has been scammed, taking a lot of money from her, making her think the appliances were expensive because they were from certain brands. The next morning, she's at work when Tira calls her to tell her Han has filed a lawsuit to get half of the furniture in the apartment. Jane gets angry and rushes to Han in front of all the employees, accusing him of scamming her. She calls him a stupid fraud and tells him she found out the real prices of the appliances and that their prices were not what he made her believe. She tells him she'll make his life hell. He asks her to leave the apartment since she will be traveling to Switzerland and won't need it. But she tells him she's now the manager and won't give up her position or travel. When she calculates all the money she spent, she tells him his share in the apartment is only 7%, so it will eventually go to her. She goes to the general manager and tells him she won't be traveling and will continue working with them. That night, she goes out with Lee, and they have fun and laugh together. They drink a lot until they pass out. The next morning, Jane is shocked when she wakes up to find herself lying next to Lee. He wakes up too, and they remember what happened last night, feeling very embarrassed around each other. Jane asks him to return to the Capitol office and pretend nothing happened between them, but Lee tells her he's staying with them and not returning to the Capitol office. She wakes up and goes home without saying a word to anyone, heading straight to her room alone. Her sister goes to check on her from the door and thinks she's crying. She tells their mother that Jane is probably crying because her fiancé left her. Jane gets ready to go to work, but her sister reminds her that her car isn't outside, and Jane suddenly remembers. And she realizes she left it there yesterday when she was with Lee. So, she has to take the bus to get to work. She ends up being very late for the meeting. When she arrives, she's feeling nervous and anxious about what happened with Lee. To make matters worse, she's caught a cold and keeps sneezing. Lee brings her some tissues. She's distracted during the meeting and unprepared to analyze the data, so she asks a colleague named Dong to take over for her. After the meeting, Jin feels really sick and can't stop sneezing. Lee goes down to the pharmacy to get her some medicine and is very gentle with her. On their way back, Yoon sees him and asks why he's at the main branch when he works at the Capitol office. He tells her he's been transferred to Jin's team and will be working with her here. Switching to Jin's mother, who's at the supermarket, she bumps into an old friend who apologizes for missing Jin's wedding because she was traveling in the US. She tries to give Jin's mother a wedding gift, but Jin's mom refuses and explains that the wedding was called off, thank God. The friend is surprised since Jin's mother used to talk so much about Jin's fiancé, how charismatic and successful he was in his career. Later that night, Jin contacts a buyer to sell a speaker and some other devices and sends him her address. We see Dong in the bathroom and his daughter accidentally walks in on him, not knowing he was inside. She gets very embarrassed and goes to her room. Her mother comes in and explains that Dong hadn't been living with them, so he's not mindful of his actions. We learn that Dong's relationship with his wife and daughter is very strained because he had been living away from them for a long time. We then switch to Han, who is shocked when he enters the apartment and sees trash scattered everywhere. He yells at Yoon for not taking out the trash and makes her take it out. Yoon is surprised and remembers when she used to live with Jin. Jin treated her like a queen and would never let her take out the trash, saying he wouldn't allow her to lift anything dirty because she was his princess. After that, we see Lee ringing Jin's doorbell. She's shocked when she sees him at her door, realizing he's the buyer helping her sell the devices. He double-checks the address to confirm it, remarking on the coincidence. They go inside, and when Lee sees the device, he helps her sell it for a higher price and shows her how to list things online for better sales. She follows his advice and sells the item for a good price. He jokes that he deserves a favor in return and asks her to treat him to dinner since he helped her get a good deal. They go to a restaurant together, but Jin is shocked when she sees her colleagues entering the restaurant. She's worried they'll misunderstand her being with Lee and think they're in a relationship. She quickly hides under the table and sneaks out the restaurant's back door so that none of them see her. Once outside, she waits for Lee and waves at him when she sees him to come over. While they are standing there, Lee asks if she likes him. She doesn't know how to respond and tries to deny it, but it's clear she has feelings for him. Next, we see Jin exercising in the morning. There's fog on the road, causing a 14-car pileup accident. Jin rushes to work without changing her clothes, and they discuss the weather conditions. Two of the employees are impressed with Jin's intelligence and feel she deserves someone better and richer than Han, especially since she recently got promoted. Han overhears them and gets upset about how the employees think Jin was too good for him and starts realizing he lost her. Later, each person heads to their office. One of the employees asks Lee about the girl he likes and mentions she saw her leaving through the back door. Lee remembers Jin telling him she considers him just a colleague and that their relationship could never be more than that. He tells the employee there's nothing official between them yet and that she's just a colleague. Jin overhears this and gets angry, asking Lee to prepare reports about work. The employees are surprised by how she talks to him, especially since she has never raised her voice to any of the staff before. Afterward, the broker Jin is selling the apartment to calls her, saying the price she's asking is too high, and suggests lowering it a bit if she's in a hurry to sell. She tells him she'll think about it and get back to him. Meanwhile, one of the employees asks Lee if he has found a place to live yet. He says he's still looking. We then return to Jin's mother, who goes to a marriage office to register Jin's name, hoping to find her a suitable groom. Tira disapproves of what her mother is doing, but she can't stop her. Meanwhile, Jin is in the bathroom when the girl who is standing with Lee approaches her, asking if she knows who the girl Lee is dating is. Jin gets nervous and suggests that Lee might be lying to them and pretending she works with them. However, the girl insists she saw her leaving through the back door of the restaurant as soon as they entered to avoid being seen. Jin gets even more anxious and changes the subject. On the other side, we see Dong, who works at the meteorological agency, sitting at home with his daughter and wife. However, their relationship remains very strained. When he tries to help his wife in the kitchen, a plate slips from her hand and breaks. She gets into an argument with him, blaming him for neglecting her and their daughter, stating that he has been distant and focused only on his job. He tries to apologize and calm her down. We then go back to Han, who sees a photo of Yoon with Lee and realizes they used to be in a relationship. He gets upset that Yoon never told him. The next morning, the employees are surprised to find that Lee stayed at work overnight to finish the reports Jin had asked for. When Jin arrives, she collects the reports from Lee. One of the employees comes up to show her the article that Yoon published in the newspaper, which criticizes the work and efficiency of the meteorological agency. Jin gets furious and realizes that Yoon is not trustworthy and has tricked her. Yoon had published what Jin had casually mentioned when Yoon asked her for some information for a simple news report about the agency. Jin goes to confront Yoon and scolds her for distorting most of what she said. Han arrives to calm Jin down and takes the blame on behalf of Yoon. After Jin leaves, Han argues with Yoon about what she did, explaining to her that Jin is very successful in her job and won't be harmed by a mere news report, and she should stop trying to hurt her. During the argument, Han pulls out Yoon's picture with Lee and asks her why she lied to him and pretended not to know him. Yoon doesn't respond to him. Jin goes to apologize to the general manager, explaining that she was helping Yoon with her report and didn't know she would twist her words and publish something harmful. He accepts her apology. Later that night, Jin is having dinner with Tira and her mother. She is shocked to learn that her mother registered her name with a marriage office. She gets angry, packs her clothes, leaves the house, and goes to her apartment, waiting for her mother to change her mind and fix what she did. Jin calls Lee to wake him up, asking about certain parts of the report she submitted as an excuse because she's feeling upset. She keeps calling him repeatedly, making it impossible for him to sleep, so he decides to go to her. A little while later, the doorbell rings. When Jin opens it, she's surprised to see Lee. She asks him why he's there at this hour. He tells her he couldn't sleep because of her calls and came to get some food because he was hungry, so he decided to eat with her since she's also up late. They continue working together after they eat, and Lee falls asleep. Jin can't help but admire his peaceful face and his charming looks. She remembers when he told her he knew she had feelings for him and asked her not to lie about it. But she denied being interested in him. She starts thinking about giving him a chance and trying to get closer to him. She falls asleep as well. The next morning, they both wake up to the sound of the alarm clock. Jin is shocked to find out she's late for work. She quickly rushes to get dressed. Lee asks her to listen to him, but she refuses, saying she's in a hurry. After she leaves, Yoon calls Lee and he shouts at her, telling her not to call him again. At that moment, Jin returns because she forgot something in the house. She overhears the conversation by accident and feels upset. They both get into the car to head to work. On the way, Jin asks him to drop her off so no one at the office will think they came together, But just as they open the window, they see one of the employees standing next to them at the traffic light. The employee is surprised to see them together. Before getting into the elevator, Jin tells him that they met by coincidence on the road. Jin is surprised when she arrives and finds out it rained heavily the previous night. She quickly rushes upstairs to attend the meeting. While she's talking, Lee keeps challenging her, trying to show he understands. Jin then asks the employees to analyze the data for the last 10 years in the area where it rained to determine if it will rain again. Yoon meets Lee away from the employees and tells him Han found out the truth. She's very upset with him. At this point, Han approaches them and confronts Lee, telling him to stay away from Yoon and not talk to her, especially since his job doesn't require him to deal with reporters. Afterward, Han goes to talk to Jin about what happened. She tells him that she knew about Lee's relationship with Yoon as soon as Yoon transferred to Lee's team. He responds with disbelief. Really? And gets upset with her because she approved the transfer, even though she knew that Han and Yoon were married. He assumes she did it to annoy him because she still loves him. He tells her to get these thoughts out of her head because he is a married man and loves his wife, Yoon, and he doesn't think about her anymore. She laughs and says, "You idiot, do you think you're the center of the universe?" And then kicks him in the leg, causing him to fall to the ground. She leaves him and walks away. When she goes upstairs, Lee comes to ask if she was upset because of his comments during the meeting. She is about to argue with him, but notices that all the employees are staring at her because of her unusual tone of voice. She stops herself and takes Lee to the dining room to talk privately. He asks her what Han wanted with her, and she's surprised by his question. She tells him she didn't ask what he and Yoon were talking about, and then shares with him what happened. After they finish, Lee tells her that he will come over to her house later that night. At that moment, the employee who saw them together in the car walks in, and they both get nervous. Lee tries to cover up the situation by explaining that she was scolding him because of what he did at the meeting, but the employee embarrasses him by saying, "I didn't even ask you anything." We then return to Han, who goes to have lunch with Yoon, laughing with her in front of the employees to show them that their relationship is strong and unaffected by what Yoon did. Suddenly it starts raining, and Jin quickly goes to her office to monitor the situation. She scolds Sue for not noticing the radar signal, but Sue explains that analyzing 10 years of data is very difficult to complete in one day. If she had been given a specific task, she could have focused more on the radar. At that moment, an electrical short circuit occurs in the factories and the roads get blocked. Jin learns from the general manager that 2 workers are missing because of the disasters caused by the rain, which deeply upsets her. At the end of the day, Lee is heading home when he overhears Han talking to Yoon on the phone, asking what food she wants him to bring her. Han deliberately raises his voice so Lee can hear, trying to make him jealous, but Lee doesn't seem bothered. Later that night, Jin goes with Dong to the site where the workers are missing. It is freezing, so Dong gives Jin his jacket. After confirming the workers are still alive, they go to a restaurant for dinner. Jin notices that Dong has his suitcase with him, so she realizes he left his house. After they eat, Dong continues to drink until he passes out, and Jin has to take him back to his place. But before they enter the building, she is surprised to see Lee coming out. She suspects that he might be involved with someone there. The next day, Lee and Jin sit down to talk, and Jin admits she can't continue with him and that they both need time to think about whether they should continue together or not. Jin is upset because she found out that Lee had been visiting a woman who lives in the building. She leaves to get back to her work, but Lee tells her he was visiting his father, not a woman from the building. He explains that his father is a gambler. When he went to the woman's place, it was to find his father, but he was shocked to find him still gambling. His father chased after him, trying to get money from him, but Lee refused to give him any because he had already taken all the money Lee had saved last year. Lee said he had no money and refused when his father asked him to take out a loan secured against his job. At this point, we learn that Lee's father saw him with Jin at the entrance to the building and suspected his son knew Jin and was interested in her. The next day, Jin is sitting at her desk when she gets a call from security informing her that someone wants to see her. She goes down to find out who it is and discovers it's Lee's father. He tells her he has something important to say about his son in exchange for some money, especially after he learned about her relationship with him. Meanwhile, Lee keeps asking the employees where Jin is. Suddenly, he hears her phone ringing. When he answers, it's Tira, Jin's sister, who tells him their mother is sick and has been taken to the hospital. He rushes downstairs to inform Jin. When Jin answers Tira, she is skeptical and thinks they are pretending to get her to reconcile with her mother and return home. But when she hears the concern in Tira's voice, she becomes very worried about her and says she will finish her work and come in the morning. Tira gets angry and hangs up on her because Jin seems more concerned with her job than their mother. The employees decide to help Jin in any way they can so she can go to her mother. Dong, the head forecaster, comes down to tell her that the weather is stable until morning and that he will cover for her until she returns. Jin thanks him and rushes to the hospital. When she arrives, Tira tells her that they have run tests on their mother, but the results are not yet available, because there were so many emergencies that day. After they finish their work, the next morning they find Han coming in to ask about her. They tell him that she left last night due to personal reasons. Everyone is surprised by how often he visits the department and asks about Jin, even though he's the one who broke up with her. Myung-hee explains that he needs Jin for his own benefit to help him with the story he's writing, and that Jin used to help him with all his stories. Later, Myung-hee steps outside and sees her husband's boss yelling at him. It becomes clear that her husband isn't comfortable at work. She talks to him and lets him know that she agrees with his decision to travel, but she asks him not to be away from her and the kids for more than a year. She tells him she'll take care of the house and the kids during his absence. He is deeply moved by her words and starts crying because she is standing by him and supporting him, even though his travel will be very hard on her. At the hospital, Jin's mother wakes up and finds Jin sitting beside her. She is very moved when she sees Jin sleeping in the chair, realizing how much Jin loves her and cares for her. Once they're assured of her condition, they take her back home. There, Jin sees the food her mother had been cooking before she fell ill, and she takes some of it back to her apartment. At this time, Lee goes to give money to his father, who tells him to help him. Lee is happy to see him, but his father says, "Did my talk with the manager have any effect on you?" Lee is shocked by his father's words and realizes that he had gone to see Jin and took money from her. He goes to see her and apologizes for what his father did, feeling very embarrassed, but she ignores his words and invites him to dinner at her apartment. She tells him that her mother makes this dish on the same day every year and explains that her father ruined his life by himself after he was fired from his job, abandoning her, Tira, and their mother. She suggests that Lee move his things to her apartment and live with her. She tells him that if one day he feels he doesn't love her, he should be honest and not act like Han and her father did. Meanwhile, Yoon is sitting with Han, telling him that she hasn't registered their marriage certificate yet. They were rushing to register it to apply for a loan to buy an apartment to live in instead of the rented one they are currently in. She asks him to delay the registration of their marriage certificate for a while. When he asks her why, she tells him that he has changed since they got married and that she is not happy with him. Besides, they are going through financial difficulties. Back to Lee, who refuses to live with Jin because he is afraid the same thing that happened with Yoon will happen with her, and that they will end up breaking up. He then goes to look for a room to rent, but can't find one that suits him. The next morning, he wakes up to find himself sleeping in his car. He goes to the workplace bathroom to take a shower, and is surprised to find Dong there too. He follows him when he leaves the bathroom until he finds him living in a room with 2 beds. Lee is happy that he found a place to stay. Later at work, Han gets into the elevator with Myung-hee and is surprised that she agreed to her husband's travel. He asks her how she could do that, and she tells him that any married couple must support each other. He then tells her about his problem with Yoon, pretending it's a friend's problem, and asks her to explain why Yoon might not want to register their marriage. Myung-hee suggests that Yoon might be afraid of continuing her life with him and is not happy, so she doesn't want to formalize the marriage before making a decision. In the forecasting room, we see Jin informing the employees about the weather conditions to respond to complaints and inform the public. Soo receives a call from a man asking about the weather, but he starts threatening her, saying his son holds a high position and could ruin them all. He also insults her. Young snatches the phone from her and yells at the caller before hanging up on him. Shortly after, Han comes in asking who responded to the client, and they explain what happened. Sun breaks down in tears as she recounts the incident, and Jin comes over to talk to her. Jin tells her that without the complaints from the workers and people whose jobs depend on their forecasts, they wouldn't understand the importance of their work. Her words comfort Sue and change her perspective on their job. Dong recalls a similar situation that happened to Jin some time ago. However, at that time, he didn't speak to her calmly as Jin did with Sue. Instead, he told her, "If there's another job that pays well, go do it," and yelled at her then. At the end of the day, the employees are heading home, but Lee refuses to take the elevator with them. Instead, he waits for Jin. When she comes out, she suggests they go have dinner together. Meanwhile, we see Tira, Jin's sister, looking for the city crocodile story in the library. She can't find it, so the librarian brings it from the storage. Suddenly, Jin enters the library and picks up the city crocodile story to read. He laughs as soon as he opens it. Tira approaches him, and he's surprised to see her because they had met before when Tira went to deliver food to Jin, but didn't find her in her apartment. She ended up giving the food to Jin's neighbor, Jin, who asks her to come and take the food from his place because the smell is overwhelming his house. After a while, she asks him what made him laugh in the story. He tells her that the author of the story knows nothing about crocodiles and that most of the information is incorrect. Tira gets upset because she is the one who wrote the story. We go back to Lee, who takes some food and heads to Dong's workplace to stay with him until he finds a place to live. He brought the food for dinner, but when he gets there, he tells Dong that he had dinner out with his girlfriend. Dong asks him why he didn't go back to her place, and Lee explains that he had been lying to her all this time, but she found out today that he doesn't have a place to stay. Lee also realizes that Jin didn't have a place to live after her father died. Her mother worked in a restaurant. Tira went to live with her uncle, and she stayed with her aunt after spending a night on the street. The next morning, Han meets Jin and offers her coffee. He asks her to help him with the new article he needs to write, but Jin refuses. She tells him that if he asks her for anything else, she will report him to her superior. Later, Jin learns from the employees that Lee and Dong are staying in the night shift room. She goes to talk to them and tells them they need to find another place to live and that they can't rely on the night shift room. They agree and start packing their things to leave the room. That night, Jin sees Lee and Dong sleeping in their car, so she takes them to her apartment. Lee goes to the supermarket to buy some things for the house, and by coincidence, Shin goes out to throw away the trash and sees the elevator going up to the 12th floor, where Jin lives. He quickly grabs some food and heads up to give it to her. Back at Jin's apartment, the doorbell rings. She thinks Lee has forgotten something and is shocked when she opens the door to find Han unconscious. At that moment, Dong comes out of the bathroom. Shin comes down to give her the food without knowing she is Jin. Lee opens the elevator and sees them all gathered together. Jin grabs Han by his shirt and drags him downstairs. Dong takes advantage of her absence and hints to Shin that he wouldn't feel comfortable living with Jin in the same apartment, hoping that Shin would take him in and let him live with him. But Shin tells him, "You'll get used to it, don't worry," and leaves to go back upstairs. Lee takes Han downstairs and drives him home because Han can't go home in his current condition. He calls Yoon to come pick him up when he arrives. The next day, Jin prepares to go to work. She shows them where the food is and everything in the kitchen. Dong is surprised to see Lee knowing where everything is. When he asks him, Lee gets very nervous and says that Jin told him before she left. On the way to work, Jin gets into a car accident, and her car is damaged. She calls Han to send the new insurance company, as he had changed it without telling her. Han drives to her location to take her to the company, but Jin refuses to ride with him and says she'll take a taxi to work. She also tells him to attend the meeting at Dongja in her place. Han tells her they're in a tunnel and it's impossible to find a taxi, so she reluctantly agrees to ride with him. At the weather forecasting center, the air conditioning breaks down and the employees can't stand the heat. They keep calling the maintenance workers to hurry up with the repairs. The newspaper editor, for whom Han was supposed to write a new article, calls to argue with Yoon because she convinced him to have Han write for them. Now, Han has called to apologize and say he won't be able to submit the article, obviously because Jin refused to help him, and he can't write it alone. Yoon tries calling Han multiple times, but He sees her calls and doesn't answer. He goes to Jin to talk to her, upset that she called Han and not him. Jin explains that she only called Han for the insurance company, nothing more. But Lee is very upset with her because he was worried about her and couldn't focus during the whole meeting. Jin apologizes for not reassuring him. Coincidentally, Yoon sees Lee heading to Jin's press conference with the journalists and calls out to him. She asks him if he loves Jin now, but he tells her it's none of her business. When she finds out, she asks if it's their co-worker, but Lee refuses to tell her. They both go to the meeting, and Jin and Han are surprised to see them entering together. After Jin finishes answering all the journalists' questions, Lee and Han start fighting in front of everyone. All the employees start talking about what happened, shocked to learn they were in a relationship before her marriage. They speculate about the reason for their fight. Later, we see Jin and Lee having dinner together outside. Jin tends to the wound Han caused him, and they keep laughing and joking around, enjoying their time together. It's clear that Han is watching them from his car and feels very upset. When he gets home, he tells Yoon that Lee is involved with Jin, which shocks her. The next day at work, Han confronts Jin, angrily telling her that Lee isn't right for her. He is very upset with her, but she tells him it's none of his business. After finishing his talk with her, he is surprised that Yoon overheard their conversation. Jin calls Lee on the computer so no one else notices. They find out that Yoon knows the nature of their relationship. We then see Yoon's mother-in-law calling her to invite them for dinner the next day at 6 since it's a holiday. At the store, Yoon buys some things before heading home. When Ham sees the bag she bought, he starts arguing with her because it was very expensive and they're short on money. The next day, Lee and Jim decide to go out together. Ham follows them to take photos and expose them to all their colleagues. But then he realizes he left his camera in the car, so he gets frustrated and decides to stop following them, especially since Yoon had been calling him non-stop before he left the car. When he gets back, he finds a tow truck has taken his car because he parked it incorrectly. He runs after it to catch up. Later, we see Jin cooking while Lee jokes around and takes pictures of her. They have a really great time together. Han misses lunch with Yoon at her mother's place. When he finally gets home, she argues with him because he forgot his mother's birthday and didn't show up. The next day at work, the boss orders Han and Lee to team up and complete the tasks assigned to them. Jin worries about Lee, fearing he might act rashly and fight with Han again, but Lee reassures her. Meanwhile, the meteorologist Sue is observing everything, and she's beginning to suspect that Jin and Lee might be in a relationship. After work, Han goes home and has another argument with Yoon because she thinks Han still loves Jin. She tells him that's why she never agreed to divorce him. The next day at work, Jin asks Yoon why she and Lee broke up. Yoon tells her that Lee never acknowledged their marriage and was completely against the idea, which shocks Jin. Meanwhile, Jin's mother decides to visit her daughter in her apartment and brings some food with her. She's surprised when she gets into the elevator and sees Lee going up to the 12th floor. Shin also gets in with them. As soon as they exit the elevator, Jin's mother sees Dong coming out of the apartment to throw away the trash and is shocked. Lee quickly calls Jin and urges her to come back to the apartment because her mother found out they are living together. Jin's mother keeps asking them if they are married, about Shin's age, and whether he is married too. Jin rushes back upstairs and explains to her mother that they are staying with her temporarily until the weather conditions improve. She then takes her mother to a taxi to go home. Jin's mother keeps hinting that she wants her to get closer to Shin, who lives upstairs, but Jin doesn't give her the chance and closes the door as the taxi drives away. Meanwhile, Han's mother calls him to thank him for the bag he got her as a gift and says her friends loved it. Han is confused because he didn't buy any bags, and he realizes that Yoon did it. He goes to apologize to her for what he said and asks her where she got the money for the bag. She tells him that she had been saving a little on the side. Later that night, Jim talks to Lee about why he refused to get married. He tells her that the difficult circumstances he experienced in his family made him not ready to repeat them. They both struggle to sleep all night. The next day, they all go to work together, and Jim invites Ham for coffee. She starts talking to him and asks him about his married life with Yoon. He tells her that they aren't happy and that their relationship has deteriorated a lot compared to before. This has strained their relationship with the people closest to them because of how much they've drifted apart. On the other side, Lee asks Yoon how she felt when he told her he wouldn't marry her. She tells him that she was shocked by his words to the point that she was speechless. She had so many questions in her mind without answers. Lee realizes that this is what Jin is feeling now. In the forecasting room, Myung-ji accidentally posts the wrong information on the official Weather Bureau website. They correct her quickly, but she leaves the room feeling very upset. Jin follows her out, and Myung-gi apologizes, explaining that she hasn't slept for a few days because she's been busy with her kids and hasn't been able to focus. Jin gives her the night shift off so she can rest and decides not to inform the general manager about what happened. Myung-gi advises Jin not to get married and tells her to live her life, enjoy her free time, and not worry about responsibility or raising children. Jin thinks to herself, if only you hadn't spoken. By coincidence, Dong sees his daughter's school trip at his workplace. He takes advantage of the situation and talks to her, trying to strengthen his relationship with her. When he learns she'll be coming back next week, he tells her he'll invite her to lunch in the cafeteria. After work, Shin is surprised when Tyra knocks on his door with food. She forces her way in, pretending she needs to wash her hands, but in reality, she's doing this because her mother asked her to. Shin, however, is a bit of a cleanliness freak. Lee is disgusted by the smell of the food she brought. When Tyra comes out of the bathroom, she starts looking at his books and gets really excited when she finds the city crocodile among them. She asks him to help her with a new story she's writing about penguins. Coincidentally, Lee opens the door and sees Jin's mother standing there watching the stairs. He's puzzled by her behavior and invites her inside. Once there, Jin gets into an argument with her mother when she finds out her mother wants to set her up with Shin. Jin makes it clear that she isn't planning to get married, which upsets her mother, who then leaves. Lee follows her downstairs to put her in a taxi since Jin refused to accompany her. The next day at work, the general manager finds out that incorrect information was posted on the website and scolds Jin for not informing him. He calls her to his office and asks if she is capable of managing the team. Jin apologizes for what happened and promises it won't happen again. Later, Jin is asked if she has chosen a team member to travel for 2 months to Jeju Island, where the typhoon center is located, to monitor the weather conditions there. Jin says she'll decide today. She finds no one more suitable for this task than Lee. Lee is shocked to learn she wants him away for 2 months. He thinks she wants to break up with him, which is why she's sending him to the island. Meanwhile, Yoon packs her clothes and leaves the house after the argument they had. At work, the employees decide to have a group dinner to celebrate Lee's upcoming departure to the typhoon center on Jeju Island. We see Dong's wife filing for divorce against him. The next day, Dong's daughter's school trip visits the meteorological headquarters, and Dong is very happy to see her. They have lunch together, with So Myung joking around. They tell her she looks just like her mother and inform her that Dong is a renowned meteorologist, which makes her very proud of her father. While eating, Dong gives her a piece of meat, but a little later, she collapses in the bathroom, unable to breathe, with a rash all over her body. Everyone rushes to the bathroom after one of the employees sees her and alerts them. They take her to the hospital, where her mother argues with Dong because their daughter is allergic to meat, and he forgot and gave her some to eat. Jin, Myung, and Soo have lunch together, waiting for Lee to join them for dinner. However, Lee is with Jin's mother at another restaurant. She asks him to convince Jin to be more open to a relationship with Lee and to marry him. He manages to keep his composure. After the meal, Lee buys a gift for Jin and takes her home because she's waiting for him outside. The next morning, he leaves for the typhoon center. A few days later, the forecasting team gets a call from the hospital informing them that Lee was injured in the explosion on Jeju Island and has been taken to the hospital. Myung contacts them to reassure them since she was also a correspondent on the island. Jin breaks down crying when she sees Han in front of her and blames him because her experience with him is why she never confessed her feelings to Lee. She doesn't know what she would do if something happened to Lee. At this moment, Jin's father arrives at work and starts arguing with the employees. He tries to provoke Jin by telling them she's involved with his son, Lee. We go back in time 16 hours earlier. Dong's daughter was discharged from the hospital and went home with her mother. Lee arrives at the island and starts working with the team there. They are very happy with him. Then we return to the present moment when the meteorological office receives a call from the hospital informing them of Lee's accident. We go back again to the time Lee arrived at work, and Yoon went to visit her mother on the island, where she and Lee coincidentally run into each other. At this moment, Jin's mother reaches out to her and lets her know that she and Lee went out to talk alone. She tells her that she feels like Lee is interested in her. Jin gets upset with her mother and asks her not to do that again, then hangs up the phone. After that, she goes out to lunch with Lee. He asks her what she thinks of him, and she says that he's good and not that bad. Han is surprised by her words because she used to belittle him when they were together. She explains that she did that to push him to do his best at work and to improve. Later, Yoon is sitting in her car and hears the explosion near Lee. She sees that he can't open his eyes and gets worried. They call for an ambulance and rush to the hospital. Meanwhile, Lee's father enters the general manager's office to argue with him, saying he will sue them and demand compensation for what happened to his son. Jin enters and suggests that he come with them the next morning to Jeju Hospital to check on Lee. After that, they can think about the compensation issue. Han also takes leave to travel with them. The next morning, the three of them board a plane to travel together. At the same time, Tira meets with Shin to discuss her new story. When Shin learns about her profit share, he calls the publishing house to ask them to increase it since she does everything herself. He even tells them that he is her manager. However, Tyra seems to be in another world entirely and appears to have feelings for Jin. After finishing his call with the publishing house, she tells him that she is divorced, surprising Shin since he hadn't even asked her. He realizes she has feelings for him. We return to Jin, who arrives at the hospital to see Lee. She breaks down in tears when she sees him and talks to him, asking if he feels any other pain that she should include in the report she will submit for compensation. Lee gets angry at her and asks Jin to take him outside. Afterward, Lee leaves the room and has an argument with his father in front of the entire hospital. His father slaps him, leaving him shocked, and he quickly runs away from everyone. Jin chases after him to apologize for bringing his father along, but she is shocked when Lee asks her to break up. She doesn't understand why. We switch to Shin, who tells the employees that he saw Jin and Lee together in the car some time ago and that they are living together in her apartment. They agree to keep it a secret and not tell anyone. On Jeju Island, Yoon is waiting at the bus stop to go to her mother's house when Han arrives and offers to give her a ride. She refuses. At the same time, Jin arrives at the Meteorological Bureau office in Jeju to follow up on her work, and Lee also heads there. Back in Seoul, Tira sends some drawings to Shin to get his opinion, but by mistake, Shin sends them to the Meteorological Bureau office in Jeju. Jin quickly calls Dong to fix the mistake on his end. At the end of the day, Dong returns home and asks his wife to give him 3 months to live together. If she still feels uncomfortable, she can file for divorce. He promises to be a good husband. Meanwhile, we see Yoon at her mother's house. After reconciling with her, before they sleep, he asks her to register their marriage as soon as they return, but Yoon refuses due to his excessive interest in Jin and Lee. Her stepfather enters the room and takes Han outside to argue with him, shouting that he promised never to upset Yoon before their wedding. Yoon is happy to see him standing up for her, even though she wasn't very kind to him, and didn't even look at him. We switch back to Shin, who goes to meet Tyra. He tells her that ever since he saw her, he has been confused, causing problems at work and unable to focus because he can't stop thinking about her. Tyra is delighted and tells him she also has feelings for him. They go out to dinner together. At this time, Myung sees her husband playing with his friends in the street and gets very upset with him. When they get home, she offers him a choice: to divorce her or go back to work and share the responsibilities of raising their children, especially since it's her mother who takes care of them after she goes to work. Dong tries to improve his relationship with his daughter and wife. He brings food with him after work so they can have breakfast together. Jin goes back to her apartment in Seoul to gather Lee's belongings. She calls him to let him know she'll bring them to him so he can take them. After Lee hangs up, he sees the gift he bought for her and realizes he hasn't given it to her yet. He returns to work the next day at the main office and is shocked to find that all the employees know about his relationship with Jin. He quickly rushes to her apartment to let her know. Suddenly, Jin's mother comes out of the room holding a picture of them together, and they both don't know what to say now that everyone knows. The next morning, as Jin is getting ready to leave the house, she bumps into Jin in the elevator as she is going to work. Jin thinks her mother sent Tyra to talk to him about marrying Lee. She's about to take out her phone to call her mother when Tyra stops her, claiming she doesn't want another fight at home. When she gets home, her mother asks where she spent the night. She tells her she stayed at a friend's house. At work, Dong asks Myungji for advice on a gift he wants to buy for his daughter's upcoming birthday. She suggests buying an expensive gift or fancy clothes, and when she shows him the prices, he is shocked because they are ridiculously high. One of the employees hands Jin a report to complete for her colleague C, who is on leave because she's pregnant. He informs her that starting today, the report will be her responsibility, since Sai is pregnant and might not return to work after giving birth. Even if she does, she might be less focused on her job. He advises her to use this time wisely and advance in her career before getting married. At the end of the day, Lee goes to meet Yoom at a restaurant. At the same time, Tyra meets with Han. Jin is happy when she learns from Han that Yoom is pregnant, and advises him to treat Yoom well. She tells him to buy her flowers and express his love. He agrees with her, and when Han goes home, he brings flowers and balloons to celebrate with Yoom. However, he is shocked when he finds her coming back from outside. She tells him she's not ready to have a child at this time, especially since their relationship is strained. He gets very upset and doesn't know how to handle the situation. That same night, Jin's mother runs into Lee by chance on the street. She takes him to Jin's apartment to talk with him and learn more about his background and what his parents did for a living. We then return to Jin, who is at the hospital with Lee's father after he was hit by a car. She learns from the doctor that he has a tumor and needs a scan. When she informs him, he initially refuses because he knows he is sick. He asks her not to tell Lee anything. He agrees to stay in the hospital and get the scan done. When she gets home, her mother tells her she's glad she didn't marry Lee after learning about his lifestyle and his family's social status. This makes Jin very upset. At work, Dong continues to look up the prices of baby diapers and babysitters to calculate his budget. He joins parenting groups on Facebook. Back at the weather forecasting office, all the employees gather to determine the weather forecast. They all disagree with Lee because he wants to contradict the predictions. The general manager asks Jin for her opinion, and she supports Lee, agreeing to contradict the forecasts. Afterward, Jin goes to make coffee, and Lee follows her to confess that he still loves her and can't stay away from her. The noise outside gets louder, and everyone calls for Jin. When she comes out, she finds the other team's manager causing a scene and arguing with the employees because they contradicted the forecasts. Jin tries to talk to him calmly, but he doesn't understand her and ends up hitting her. Lee gets angry and goes to defend her, but accidentally hits the manager in the face, causing him to fall and get injured. Dong arrives at this moment after Shin called him and asked him to come. He is very upset because it's his daughter's birthday, and he had invited everyone to dinner. It was the first time they were gathering in 10 years. After the manager regains consciousness, they all stand and monitor the weather. They are all happy when they see that their predictions were correct, unlike the manager, who is very embarrassed. At the end of the day, Tyra is with Jin at the hospital, and they have dinner together after they become very close. Meanwhile, Jin's mother takes food and goes to Jin's apartment to bring it to her, but she can't get in because Jin changed the password. She calls Jin to ask for it, but Jin refuses to give it to her, asking her to give the food to Shin so he can store it in his fridge. She is shocked when she sees Tyra with him and starts hitting her, while Shin tries to pull her away, but it's no use. We return to Lin, who Jin takes to the hospital where his father is admitted so he can visit him. He finds out from the doctor that his father's condition is very serious, which deeply affects him. He breaks down crying when he sees his father lying on the bed. Meanwhile, Yoon goes to the doctor with Han to check on the baby after she changed her mind about not wanting the child. Their relationship has improved, and the doctor lets them hear their baby's heartbeat. They are both overjoyed and moved when they hear it. Later, Tira and Shin are sitting in front of her mother, who starts asking Shin about his family, social status, and finances since he is planning to marry Tyra. Shin welcomes the idea of marriage, but Tyra refuses, and they start arguing in front of her mother, who eventually leaves them and walks away. The next day, a rumor spreads among the employees that Jin is pregnant with Lee's child and that they will be getting married soon. When they go to congratulate her, she tells them that she and Lee have been separated for a while and that there's nothing between them. During lunch, Han comes to eat with her and lets her hear her son's heartbeat. He asks her to give Lee another chance because he loves her, and she loves him too. Meanwhile, Lee receives a call from the hospital informing him that his father left the hospital, so he rushes out to search for him in the streets, but can't find him. Eventually, his father calls him, advising him to stay with Jin because she loves him, and it's hard to find someone like her. He refuses to go back to the hospital or start chemotherapy. Lee breaks down in tears after the call ends. Jin's mother coincidentally sees him. On the other hand, Dong's wife visits him in the room where he sleeps at work and brings clothes to help repair their relationship just like their daughter wanted. At night, Jin goes home and is surprised to find her mother waiting outside the apartment door. She lets her in, and they go inside. Her mother is there to ask if she broke up with Lee because of his father's illness. Jin tells her that he was the one who broke up with her because he didn't want to burden her with his father's condition. Her mother then asks if the house's password is Lee's birthday, and Jin tells her it is the date of the first day they met. Realizing she truly loves him, her mother advises her to get back with him and says she approves of their relationship. That night, Jin meets Lee on the street, and he apologizes. She tells him she still loves him, and they return to her apartment together when they find snow falling on them. The next day, Minji is heading to work, and her husband gives her a glass of milk to drink before she leaves. Their relationship is better than before, and her husband is now taking responsibility for the children. We then move to Dong, who helps his wife prepare breakfast, and they all have breakfast together, enjoying a happy family moment. Lee also moves in with his father, and their relationship improves. We return to Shin, who goes to visit Tyra at her house and shows her the cover of the new story after it was published. He tells her that from now on, he will publish all her stories. Tyra is very happy to see that he cares about her and wants to marry her. Finally, we see Lee going with Jin to her house because his father is going to ask Jin's mother for her hand in marriage now that he is cured and healthy again. Before going in, Lee gives Jin the gift he bought for her before he traveled to Jeju Island. She is overjoyed and accepts it. They are happy in their life together after he proposed to her. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed our recap, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out more recaps on our channel. Take care.